All right, welcome aboard, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Michael D. Shaw is my guest. Gee, what a great, colorful shirt, Mike.
Thanks.
You're
I
doing
put it
it.
on just before the show,
I think that when us older guys like to wear these sort of colorful Hawaiian shirts, I was told that recently. Um, the I think that as pivots of history, there are often events that can change the course and the direction of an entire political system, an entire culture. And I've been watching for such an event that might really trigger a taking on of and a transformation of the what has been euphemistically called the deep state, what President Trump refers to as the deep state, what Steve Bannon refers to as the administrative state. It's this unelected, amorphous, powerful, faceless bureaucracy that has really taken the high ground of control in our system ever since Wilson. And it's what Michael J. Glennon calls the double government. His thesis is that it really accelerated under the National Security Act of 1948. And I think that that event is going to be the exposure of the CDC and the COVID scandal.
boy, I hope so.
And I think that this is going to be a real tough one. It may happen, it may not. It is very pivotal to the moving forward because I don't know if you heard any of the testimony of RFK Jr. today in Congress,
Yeah, I did
but
see some of it.
he is laying it out in no uncertain terms that he stated that the entire COVID um, pandemic was filled with lies, that from day one, from beginning till end, and that since he has begun to come out like this, and since he fired or the CDC fired the top figure over there and several other people, and then there was a protest, I can tell that this scandal is going to be the pivotal scandal. I can tell it because the left is going berserk in a way that I have not seen them go in many, many years.
Oh, don't forget one thing. There's a pretty long list of representatives and senators that have been given lots of money by Big Pharma,
Oh,
including
yeah.
your own Senator Liz Warren.
Well, I mean, yeah, Kennedy named it right out there. What, 600 fat ones, 600 G's from Big Pharma. She ignored that. But the point is that, yeah, I mean, they have bought up pretty much the entire establishment. And it's they certainly have seemed to own lock, stock, and barrel the CDC and the NIH.
Well,
They're,
remember, too, it's not only that. They own part of the broadcast media. If you took the drug ads off network television, it would close down.
it would collapse tomorrow.
Yeah,
And Kennedy's talking about doing just that.
yeah.
That basically the entire edifice is of COVID is lies. I mean that the whole thing was probably created in a lab in Maryland, the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and then it was transferred to the Wuhan lab behind the back of two presidents, Obama and Trump. That the mastermind in doing that was Fauci and Barack and several of these other figures. There was this guy over at Harvard, Lieber, who right out in the open taking like payments from a Chinese government to transfer technologies related to gain of function to China. He's fine. He's walking around. No, I think you got a slap on the wrist. But the point I'm making here, without getting into all of the nasty details, is that the whole thing, we don't really know what happened in terms of how that was released, whether it was deliberate on the part of China or whether it leaked from the lab. It doesn't really matter. The point is that they were doing this gain of function research, which is, in other words, creating biological weapons using viruses, and that it got released to the world. And the result was this entire social experiment involving the shutting down of private businesses, the shutting down of schools, which, according to RFK, was done at the recommendation of the National Education Association. It had nothing to do with science. The shutting down of churches, and yet they kept open casinos. They kept open the big box stores while shutting down the mom and pop businesses and restaurants. The and then eventually the masking, the distancing, all the theater around it, the social experimentation around it in terms of population control. And then most damningly, and the other little factor is the big blue state governors putting COVID-19 active people into nursing homes, which is genocidal. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
Really evil. And then finally, they have the jab. They discredit legitimate FDA-approved antiviral medications that have been around for decades, like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, words that are forbidden to be mentioned to this day on the major media outlets. And they went to the exclusive use of the vaccine, which was untested and which they had in their hip pocket anyway. It is now coming out that the CDC had suppressed data that they had possession of, which indicates that the jab would result in a higher occurrence of myocarditis among young men. And we know that there were several young men who died right after the vaccine came out. Some very prominent athletes, by the way.
Yeah.
We know that it had very ill effects, and they knew, on pregnant women and on children, that there was no reason to give it to children because they weren't getting COVID. And even if they did, it wasn't a big catastrophe. And that they suppressed and sat on that information. This is so criminal. It is so evil that this would have happened. And now people are being fired over there finally. And they're running around, scurrying around, protesting this like there's some kind of this is anti-science. I heard here in Boston, this Juliette Kayyem, I don't know if you know, she might just be a local figure. She's touted as a security expert. She was a big player in all of the anti-Trump hoaxes going back to the Russia. She is claiming that RFK Jr. is like he's a eugenist. Really? He's the eugenist here?
Yeah.
This whole thing was eugenic.
Well, it's the old story of accusing your opposition of what you're doing yourself. I mean,
exactly.
What troubled me, because I was writing about this constantly as it was happening, is that anybody with a functioning brain, and unfortunately, that's not a very big percentage of the population, it seems. Everything the CDC said was a demonstrable lie at the time. Okay, the vaccines to prevent infection. No, they didn't. Vaccines to prevent transmission. No, they didn't. And they kept changing this. And I asked in a couple of articles at the time, why would anyone believe a word they say at this point?
But well, that is a question, because you're right.
I'll tell you why. Because in an atheistic society, you worship authority. And if you were raised all your life, the CDC and the NIH and so on, they can't be wrong. Right?
Well, I mean, this whole rotten experiment was an attempt to see how far that could go, how much the world
went a lot farther than I would have even thought.
No, it was, and it was a worldwide thing. It wasn't just here. I mean, Australia went into like almost full Nazi mode, and New Zealand with what's her name there? That attractive woman, the young woman, Ardern, complete lockdowns with people being arrested if they stepped off their lawns, and put into what can only be described as concentration camps. I'm not saying they're death camps, but people would completely lose their freedom under the quarantine rules that those countries put in. And the jab, you're right. I mean, when they rolled that out, I remember specifically 95% immunity from the 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 Moderna, which were making huge amounts of money, and Pfizer. And then shortly after that, oh, by the way, no immunity. Maybe you get immunity for maybe a week, and then but still do it because it'll save your life. If you go to the hospital, you won't die. Then that was debunked by a very comprehensive survey done by the Cleveland Clinic, which is not some right wing
No.
outfit. I mean, it's America's most respected medical
Well, there
institute.
were people within the Cleveland Clinic that were appalled at how this was handled and had enough integrity. But you know what? You didn't have to be the Cleveland Clinic.
Oh
In
well,
one article I wrote,
yeah.
I looked at these two studies that the CDC touted. Well, even if you get it, it'll prevent bad effects if you're hospitalized. But it was all crap.
That was
They didn't
complete.
take anything into account. They
Well, the
they
Cleveland
compared,
Clinic. I
they
mean,
would compare people that were 30 years old with otherwise perfect health to people who were, grossly overweight. They were 85 years old.
right.
So it was just garbage. And
Well, that's
then what I thought was very interesting, they came up with a made up term that you don't hear anymore, by the way. The made up term was a sterilizing vaccine. There's no such thing as that. That
well,
was
the
a
whole
term they
thing
made
wasn't
up.
even a vaccine at all. I
Yeah.
mean, the whole thing is, and the Cleveland Clinic results were that about 70% of their and they just did a straight survey of every single person going into the clinic with COVID or
Yeah.
diagnosed with COVID. 70% of their COVID patients got extremely sick and died. And so then that whole narrative, as the left likes to say, was blown out of the water. It did not prevent death. And the consequences of it, the health problems associated with it, are becoming more and more obvious in every passing day. People have not been the same since they got that vaccine. I don't think I've been the same since I got the vaccine.
Hmm.
I mean, that could be in my mind, but I just don't think that, I don't think I've been the same person in many ways. And, I'm strong enough to overcome it so far, but I'm pointing a lot of people aren't, and they're not conscious of it. And I think that it has resulted in a lot of major damage and death in the population. And I think that if RFK Jr. can stay this course and this scandal can continue to unfold, this is going to be the undoing of the deep state. This is
I
really
certainly hope so, but you understand there's more at stake here than just these vaccines. It's the whole notion of what the government considers science. All right.
well, that's right. And this and you should and they're doubling down on that one. They're like, oh, the firing of these hacks over at CDC who probably should be in prison, that it's anti-science, and then they're claiming it's unconstitutional for them to be fired. I think maybe they think they're gonna find another federal judge who's going to declare it unconstitutional that they be fired, just like they've done with so many of these other cases. All of a sudden, they're finding in the Constitution that these people have some kind of a divine right to a job.
That's right. Isn't there an article in the Constitution
Yeah.
saying that everybody that works for the CDC gets a permanent lifetime job?
Oh, yeah. And that even though Congress signed a bill and the president signed it called the Big Beautiful Bill, which defunds Planned Parenthood, no, a federal judge, I'm not going to mention names, decided that that's not constitutional. Apparently, Planned Parenthood is grandfathered into the U.S. Constitution. We have to the taxpayers have to give them $500 billion a year. So yeah, I mean, that's a whole different subject. But the point is that the entire rotten mess is going to reside with the CDC and the COVID, because that's the kind of situation that really brings things home to people personally. That's, this isn't, I mean, right now the establishment has everything, fixated. If you watch MSNBC, they think that the big moment, the big pivot is going to be Trump being caught up with Jeffrey Epstein, right? That
Right.
he's a pedophile and a rapist. they're working that like crazy right now, and they're not naming Trump. They're doing it the way they did the Trayvon Martin case, just working it over with the implication that this is Republicans have something against black people, and they're making it up to slant it that way. And I don't think that's working. That's because, first of all, even if there is something to that, that's just an old-fashioned sex scandal. That's nothing. That doesn't affect anyone. And besides, they're all involved with that anyway. That's not going to change society. That's not some earth-shattering business. But the COVID thing that's one of these things that is going, like I'm studying right now in my sociology class, the French Revolution. And one of the pivotal events that changed everything in France was when King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, for damn good reason, decided to get the hell out of Paris and flee and get to the border. I mean, they could already see the writing on the wall that they were going to be executed. But they got caught near the border, and they were brought back to Paris and put under house arrest. But the thing is that one particular event ended up shaking the entire French society and their acceptance of monarchy. And even the most loyal monarchists and conservative people in France really were like, this isn't good. This doesn't work. We need to go to a Republican form of government. We can't have the head of state, sneaking across the border. And right. I mean, and plus they did it so ham-handedly. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, if they really wanted to escape, they could have put on a couple of disguises and gotten out. Instead, she needs to have her hairdresser. She has to have the cook has to come, and they need a fancy coach. It's an interesting story. How this
I didn't know all the details of that, but I did know, and you're correct, it was not exactly a covert operation.
No, I mean, if they really wanted to get out, they could have gotten out, maybe roughed it a few days, instead of keep going out like in a carriage, like with a crown on. The point is that it changed the whole dynamic of French society forever. It really shifted the public. And there were some other events like that you could look at in the internal workings of any society. And my reason I bring that up, and what I'm thinking about this, is that this CDC thing is going to be the pivotal thing for our society. It's going to be potentially the final powder keg to blow up the deep state, because this affects everybody. This is health. I mean, this is a conspiracy that is so vast and that hits people so personally that they're not going. They're going to do. I mean, and you can see already from their hysterical, shrill reaction and their attacks on RFK and he's a eugenist and that they know it. They know that
there's so many facets to this thing. The power wielded by pharma. Again, all the money that's invested in quote health. If you've seen any of those short videos of Charlie Kirk when he asked some student, "Well, why does Harvard have a divine right to get all this money from the government?" And the kid said, "Well, medical research." Well, if you look at what goes under the name of medical research, it's 90% crap. Everybody knows it. I would say 3/4 of academic science is a waste. So now that this is being looked at, it's going to blow up this whole mess. It's not just the CDC. It's academic science.
Well, that's
it's academia in general. And there are people, the public, that are just shocked by this. They thought, stupidly, that these government health agencies were looking out for them, where nothing could be further from the truth. I did a deep dive on this when I was writing for Health News Digest, and it was appalling, the kind of stuff that was going on, the amount of money going to absolutely useless research.
I know, and that's all coming out, like how to trans mice and all this stuff, and how to pay for LGBT in Pakistan the money spent on social experiments, and this is taxpayer money. And again, I think that's all kind of sidebar, though. The main issue here is what the jab has done to people and what the COVID lockdowns did to people. I mean, what it
Well, it
did.
did a whole personality change to your friend Naomi Wolf, who used to be a good old liberal, and it blew her mind when she looked into this. And I'm sure you've seen her videos. She goes berserk about this.
Oh, what it did to women.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially pregnant women. I mean, it was just, and the lies around this, and just it's I mean, it's the biggest social. I mean, you brought it up with comparing Fauci to Mengele. This is the biggest social experiment since the Holocaust in terms of like dealing with a group of people. Except in a way, this is even more vast. It just affects everybody.
Well, I made the point in the article that Mengele wouldn't have done it to his own. I mean, he was a horrible guy. No one's defending him, but at least he was doing it to prisoners. He didn't go out to the general German public and try to perpetrate some sort of hoax on them.
Well, I don't know if they were even doing it to their own. I mean, do we know whether they actually got the jab or were they getting like a saline shot? I don't know.
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt that anybody of any authority didn't get the real shot. And the way you could tell was when it all started, Fauci was on TV describing in a hysterical way almost what the terrible reaction was from the shot. And you could see it was just all theatrics. He had no idea.
I mean, and also, I mean, RFK today in his testimony brought up the fact that Biden and I think probably others, and I think Harris and the rest of them, during the campaign said, "Oh, we're not going to get that shot because we don't trust Trump."
Yeah.
Then afterwards, they allegedly got the shot. I mean, was the shot changed? It's sort of like it was a lot of it did involve theater. Certainly the lockdowns. I don't think that they
Well, there
observed.
were even scandals over the vaccine itself, okay, that they said that it had been FDA approved. All right, but what, again, I had to do a deep dive on this. It was all out there. Yes, there was an FDA approved version of the vaccine, except you didn't get that one, okay?
Right.
So everything they said was a lie. Everything.
Yeah, I mean, look, even the business of the lockdowns. I mean, they were all going out. I mean, was it like, Newsom out at the French Laundry?
French Laundry, yeah.
I mean, or like you had Burks, right? Announce everybody like a queen. Everyone can't go to Thanksgiving this year. Sorry, you're going to have to do it through. We're just going to have to suck it up and do it through Zoom. You can't go out there. Then the minute after she's finished with that statement, she gets on a plane and goes to Thanksgiving at her family's house.
Yeah, of course.
And then, of course, someone in her family dropped a dime and she had to resign the next day. But the point is that that's just the tip of the iceberg. I don't think any of them paid any attention. This was all for the plebes. This was if we want to talk French Revolution, it was the third estate. This wasn't the nobility, the clergy. It was the third estate that was screwed in France. And, I think that, again, the third estate in the world is waking up. Again, I think that this is an issue that the next week or so, maybe the next months, are going to be pivotal in terms of whether or not there can be a sustaining of this rollout of these facts, or whether or not they're going to be able to suppress it. They are still censoring this like crazy. Like, I won't even bring this broadcast up on TikTok because I know I'll be shut down. I've been shut down already on YouTube. The reason I was shut off of YouTube is because of this issue. I think I interviewed.
Well, have you ever wondered what's in it for YouTube and TikTok and others to censor this information? I mean, are they getting direct payments from the government? They're certainly not getting them now.
I think it was Molly Ball in Time Magazine talks about how there was this meeting at Zuckerberg's house just before the 2016 election where they talked about how to censor opinion, how to stop Trump. And then after Trump won, which he wasn't supposed to do, they then launched this full-scale international censorship campaign involving all of these censorship mills at the major Ivy League colleges like the Shorenstein Institute at Harvard that basically focused on how to censor opinion, how to weed out what they called, quote, mis, dis, mal.
Misinformation.
Meanwhile, of course, they were engaging in it in a big way. I mean, the whole conspiracy theory that Vladimir Putin conspired with Trump to steal the 2016 election. Complete misinformation, but that was promoted, touted, and advanced in a way that hobbled the Trump administration for 3 years. Then they came up with the perfect phone call. Then they came up with the pandemic. Then they came up with lawfare after he was out of office, where they tried to put him in jail or kill him. Now it seems like now it's pretty weak what they're coming up with. But right now, there is still this window where there can be a red pilling of the world, where there can be an awakening. And this is it. We're at the precipice now. That's going to be this pivot of history.
I certainly hope you're right, but there are too many people that are too highly invested in this. All right, it doesn't matter because their entire philosophy is based on the fact that Trump is bad, and there's nothing that you could say that's going to convince them otherwise.
Right. Yeah, but those people they're going to go down. I mean, the point is that if this thing is able to get enough traction out there and is able to get enough exposure, then it's going to change history. Those people will always be around. I mean, they'll go down with the ship, who cares? The point is that they won't be able to sustain. They've already been set back by Trump's unexpected victory. He wasn't supposed to win again, and he did. And he's had success after success. The only thing that they've had to do is to stop him is their judges. I've mentioned sociologist the late Christopher Lasch from NYU, who had a thesis that the New York Times actually did a story on it, which was very accurate, where he notes that up until recent history, the main forces of politics have been the people of the world against this ruling establishment, right? I mean, that's always been the tension. But he said now it's the ruling establishment fighting the people. They're the ones who are the insurrectionists. They're the ones who are taking the measures to preserve their power. They're the ones who are doing the censorship. They're altering elections like they did in 2020, like they just did in Romania, apparently. They just threw out, we don't like the results here, we're throwing it out. They're trying to put the opposition in jail in France and in Germany. They're trying to demonize their opponents and make them illegal. They're calling the German opposition Nazis, right? I mean, in Canada, they did this to the truckers who mostly, by the way, not that it matters, but they were mostly men of color. I think most of them are from India, Pakistan. But they stood up to the COVID, but the kind of the crown jewel of this whole rotten thing, which was the digitized passports. They wanted that very badly, and the truckers in Canada said no to that, and they started blocking the highway. And within days, they would have brought the Canadian economy to its knees because the truckers run everything, even today. And that was spreading. It was spreading to the United States, to Australia, New Zealand, France, even Israel. And so they backed down because they'd been exposed, and the passports were put aside. I'm just saying that it can be done. As I've mentioned, here in Boston, you had this new, extremely authoritarian leftist mayor, Michelle Wu, the first thing she did upon taking office was to say that you had to show the passport to get into any business or restaurant. You couldn't go in unless you showed them your passport. At that time, I was attending uh, college in person, and I had to show a passport to get by the front door. I had to wear a mask in the building. It was very authoritarian in Boston, but it was even too much for Cambridge and Somerville. These left-wing cities, they were like, "No, you can," So she had to back down. Plus, the truckers happened around that time, so that went by the wayside. The point I'm saying is that they were put back on their heels in that particular agenda, but they're holding onto that for another time. They're not ever going to let go of it. The authoritarians are never going to stop conspiring to control everyone else. I do think, however, that with these revelations, which are things that you've been writing about for years, I've been talking about for years, and as have other reasonable people who report on things, this could finally really go mainstream. And that, yeah, you're going to have the people like these people I know in my synagogue who are still masked up. They're never going to stop, But the point is that that's going to be further marginalized, and they're not going to be able to sustain it. So I guess that my question is this going to happen? Are we going to finally succeed in exposing all of this rot through this pivot of the COVID jab and the CDC, or not? It is a major question, and I don't know the answer to it.
Well, I can tell you this, that from that famous line from A Few Good Men, most people can't handle the truth. And like your friends in the synagogue are still wearing masks, if they were to pull off that mask, they would have to admit that they've been fooled and been stupid all these years. All right.
Right.
I mean, at the time, for God's sake, there were hundreds of videos that showed that the mask cannot possibly work to prevent aerosolized viruses from getting into your body. The only reason masks are used in medical situations is for waterborne contamination. Classically, if you're doing surgery on someone, you're not going to spit on them. All right.
Right. I mean, the mask is used by the surgeon who's doing open surgery. I mean, that's one thing. I mean, of course. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing was theater, as pointed out by Senator Rand Paul during testimony. And that, if you go into the restaurant, you have to wear the mask until you sit down. Then you can take it off to eat, which is probably the time when you're most likely to spread a virus. I mean, it was idiocy.
Yeah, you had to put it on, and then between bites.
Yeah, right. I mean, the whole thing was absurd. But the difference here is that people were hurt by this and are still being hurt. People have died because of this. People's health have been seriously compromised. Myocarditis, blood clots. I mean, this is affecting everybody. It's not selecting people based on their politics. This is something that the massive.
Well, they're going to cling to this. What has to happen is that entire regime has to die out. They're not going to change their minds.
Well, the point is, our average people, like the media now, is responding to Kennedy finally taking the jab and all of it off of the emergency. The emergency is finally over. I didn't even know it was still in. Yeah. But they're saying, well, in Massachusetts, I mean, you got Governor Healy, talk about corruption. Oh my God. We're going to make sure that people can still get the vaccine in spite of the government's cruel attempts to deprive people of access to it. Well, first of all, I don't think most people are lining up to get this thing.
They're not. It went down to 2% of the people.
Yeah. I mean, I have these left-wing relatives who love, she tells me, Anthony Fauci and the vax. How could they do this? I mean, I didn't want to ask them this question when I saw them a few months ago, but are they up to date on their boosters? You're supposed to get it every 3 to 6 months. I don't think so. I don't think anybody's doing it now
I
because
don't know
people.
what was there ever to love about Anthony Fauci? Do people
Oh,
forget how he
he's.
screwed up AIDS?
I mean,
Was that just erased from the public record?
not to mention the experiments on homeless children.
Oh yeah.
With AZT or whatever they were injecting them. They Kennedy in his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, found mass graves in upstate New York with children who had been, picked up on the street in New York, mostly minority children, I may add, who died because of these drug experiments. Right? I mean, this is like,
Well, it keeps coming back to the rather mysterious death of Corey Mullis.
uh-huh.
Maybe the whole COVID thing would have been different if Corey Mullis were alive. But isn't it odd how conveniently he died before this thing started?
He was the inventor of the test, right?
Well, he was the polymerase chain reaction, and he himself had said on many occasions that you can't use it as a diagnostic tool. And he was right, but he hated Tony Fauci. And
very evil.
so here was a guy that was, you're older, but he didn't have any particular health issues that were known, and all of a sudden he dies, and then the whole COVID thing starts up.
Well, anybody who stands in the way. I mean, I did a book on this, assassinations in America. This is just part of history. It goes back to Julius Caesar. I mean, people who stand in the way of ambition, both personal and political, people who stand in the way, who embrace a particular agenda or philosophy that might be at odds with what the establishment wants, like John F. Kennedy, perhaps.
Yeah.
That they have to be taken away. The Clinton death count, okay? You mess around with the Clintons. Even recently, there was one that showed up. Who, I mean, already there's the lawyer who has followed the Seth Rich case, not to get into an issue,
Yeah.
is demanding, subpoenaing the Department of Justice even now. Under Trump, they're not releasing information about what happened to him. He was shot in broad daylight in the back by two gunmen. He was not robbed. They just shot him and they killed him. They left his wallet.
What's the likelihood that someone's going to walk up to you, or two of them, as it turns out, just shoot the guy for no reason?
Right. In broad daylight, right in Washington, D.C. And he was the cyber guy for, I think, Bernie Sanders. I mean, he was a liberal Democrat guy who handled the media stuff. Did he release all of those emails to what's his name from WikiLeaks? Not Snowden, the other guy, the other one. Having like a little senior moment here, but the point is that he stood in the way of Hillary. So didn't JFK Jr., by the way, but let's not even go there. But the thing is that I think that it's reasonable to assume, since you brought up Mullis, that people who stand in the way of agendas and power are expendable, always have been. That's just, it's very risky. It's a dangerous world. We could go back in history. We could look at the Venetian Doge, how they handled their opposition. I mean, it's just, that's the way of the world. People show up floating in the East River because they mess, they get a little too beyond, they know too much. But anyway, to an unpleasant subject, but to go back to this scandal, I would just urge people to watch what happens with the CDC. Let's stay on making sure that all of this information is released. It has now been verified that they were sitting on data that showed dangers to the jab and that they were not releasing that to the public while they pushed the jab. This is a genocidal level crime against humanity. This should seriously compromise any faith that we ever had in our establishment.
Well, of course, you and I never had any faith in the
No, we
entire
didn't.
world. But the trouble with all this, and I wrote recently, is that you can't change this. It's like, can you reform the FBI? No, no,
Well, this
because
is well. My
the
point here is
trouble.
that this is our one chance to just do just that,
Well,
because
right, but
because
here's
people
the
are going to
problem.
be so angry when this comes out.
Unless you fire every employee, fire every single
No,
employee.
they should all be fired and they should be prosecuted and
Well,
jailed.
whether prosecuted
Probably
or not, the point
every,
is
I
that
I think they should all be hanged for this. This is almost murder. Look, there are pivotal events. I'll give another one recently: the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown in Russia. That led to the collapse of the Soviet Union because their initial reaction to that was to lie and say this isn't happening. And then 5 weeks later, after radioactive waves had covered pretty much all of Eastern Europe, they admitted it, but they blamed, the capitalist roadsters for it. And it was at that point that the Russian people had had enough. They're like, we don't believe this anymore. We don't believe these lies. And the Soviet Union collapsed. The point I'm making here is that's what this is. This is like America's Chernobyl. The lies around the COVID virus itself and the vaccine given to our population to the degree of millions of people, the compromise of people's health, the amount of people who have died from it, the amount of people who have been sick, made sick, and irreparably sick from it, should be enough to finally to wake up the country. Even people who are hardcore goose-stepping, brain-dead followers of this can't deny it when they see their son or daughter suffering from the effects of this thing and realize what had happened. I just think that it's such an event that has that kind of potential. And if we don't do it, then it's going to get worse. I mean, we have to wake up and realize the power that this had and what this meant.
well, okay. I mean, I hope you're right, but history does not prove out your point here. All right. If you look at the aftermath of World War II, when it began to come out, communist influence in our own government,
Right.
the way we gave everything away at Yalta, what happened to Joe McCarthy, it's that people just don't want to deal with it. Russia was different because it was a dictatorship and it was boiling over. And that was the pivotal event. I agree with you.
Right.
But there have been plenty of horrific scandals in this country where nothing really.
Oh, I'll take issue with you on this only in that in the case of Joe McCarthy, in the case of Whittaker Chambers,
Yeah.
they did expose the communist conspiracy in the United States. They did fall on their swords in the case of McCarthy. They were demonized, but it did make a difference. Now, obviously, the hardcore left establishment
Well, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to challenge you on this.
but the average American was, I think had they not come forward like that, had Chambers not exposed Alger Hiss, had McCarthy not had those public hearings, we probably would be much further today toward communism or toward what FDR called convergence. It was a reassertion of American patriotism and independence.
It was a resurgence of patriotism.
It was like, and also the Canadian truckers. Well, what changed? Like the Canadian truckers, they stopped at least for now, they stopped the digital passports, which is something that's being done in communist China. We don't have to show a digital passport with all of our personal information every time we want to do a bank transaction or we want to go into a restaurant or order groceries. That is what would have happened had there not been for the truckers. So, and the truckers were demonized for this. They were called Nazis. Their bank accounts were shut down, but they did it and they stood up. So I think that, you know, you're still going to have the true believers. They won't. They're put back on their heels. McCarthy did make a difference, even though he gave his life for it. He made a difference. His soul is preserved in heaven for this.
But don't you agree that he's been demonized
Oh yeah,
by the mainstream?
doesn't matter though. He got through. He got through the lies, and he was able to wake up enough people that they can demonize all they want. It didn't. It still. It reached enough people that they were put back. I mean, they were not able to implement their communist agenda in this country, which is exactly what they
right.
done.
But wouldn't it have been better if people's minds were actually changed?
Yes, of course. But as you say, Mike, they're not going to change. They're going to go to their graves like these holograms, as I call it in my new book, or they're living in this matrix. But the point is that enough people changed. They were able to shave off enough to make a difference. The personality of Donald Trump has shaved off enough people that it has created an international movement that won't be stopped, even if he's taken out, God forbid.
I guess I have to agree with you on that, because his conversion of black men was a big deal.
Absolutely. And Hispanics and even young people and women. Yeah. I mean, they still have their hardcore. They're never going to go. They've got their secretive, illuminated establishment and all of their minions all around the world who are goose-stepping along and who are only half conscious. That's not going to change. That's been around since Adam and Eve. The point is that in every generation, you have enough people who have enough awareness of their agency in the world, that there is something greater than mere existence, that there is a God that they answer to, not just this goose-stepping establishment, and that they wake up and they step up and they go to bat. And they may be demonized like McCarthy, but they will get enough across the plate that it's going to wake up enough people. That's what we need to have happen now. That's what is happening. The only question is, can it happen enough with this, especially? And I do think that the issue right now is the COVID issue, because it has damaged enough average, normal people that they're going to look at their own lives and say, hey, this is outrageous. I've been hurt. My son.
I wish I could be as positive as you, but when I read a couple of days ago in the LA Times, Steve Lopez admitting that he got COVID after taking God knows how many vaccines. And isn't it terrible that evil Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy Jr. want to try to back off on this? It's like, how do you help people like this?
He's not going to be helped. And he's probably, look, and he doesn't realize that probably he got COVID because of the vaccine. Probably.
No, he's never going to admit that.
No, he won't admit that. But the point I'm making is enough people are going to admit it, especially as this information is released and it is getting out. The CDC sat on this information that could have put people in the grave if they had not done that. It is a horrible, evil crime. And the point is that this is the very core of this rotten establishment. And it's going, if it is exposed enough, then, we can see some real social advancement.
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, do people realize that the most active Nazis at the beginning were the doctors?
And the young, by the way, and also it was a college movement. It was young intellectuals.
Yeah.
That was the core of the Nazi movement. And women, I'm sorry to bring it up, young. I mean, we have the same thing here. Well-educated white women. So see, I get in trouble for saying this, but that's the core of this establishment. They're shrill, and they've become like crazy over this. They're worshipers. That was probably the core of the idol worshiping in the Bible times. This is what the Lord God warned us about when he talked about Molech and the practices of throwing the
Well, don't
baby.
forget about Lot's wife.
Yeah, or like throwing the baby into the burning belly of an idol. God warned us not to do that, or the golden calf at the foot of Sinai. They weren't just there bowing to a golden calf. There were orgies, there was practices that we can't even imagine what was going on there. And people got sucked into it, but there was a handful of people who said no. And that's all it takes to, and back in those days, of course, was directly involved in the world.
Yeah.
He could punish them by swallowing them up with the earth. That's not the world today. We have to do it ourselves now because we're getting a little bit biblical here, but since the days of Esther, God doesn't really, at least not up until now, do stuff actively, openly. We have to use our agency, our ability to hear his voice, our ability to know truths and to expose them as best we can.
So the hope is that you get more people red pill, and it's not just we few, we happy few.
Right. Enough of a mass of movement. And I am encouraged by that's a little thing, but watching the testimony today of RFK, he laid it out in no uncertain terms and he threw it right in their faces. And to me, that is incredible. That is courage. I mean, that's guts. I hope he's okay from this. And, I'm not saying he's a perfect person, but the point is that for him to do this and the attacks that he's undergoing from his own family, I mean, these people, they've got no soul.
Oh, that's despicable. But I mean, let's face it, most of his own family wasn't worth a damn anyway.
Oh, they're just such lowlifes. I mean, just really awful and completely sold out. I'm particularly disappointed with Carolyn Kennedy. I always liked her. Just so like rotten. But anyway, the point, being from Massachusetts, we've always had like a love-hate feeling about that family anyways. But he is embodying the very best in that family, that courageous, moralistic, very much like his father, almost like a Jesuit priest. He's serious, he's scholarly, he's courageous, he's sure of what he believes in, and he's stepping out and doing it. That's what you need. We don't have too many people like that right now. Trump is that, absolutely. And I think a lot of the people around him are like that. Tulsi Gabbard comes to mind. These people are incredible. All of them are. I mean, it's very encouraging what they're doing. They're not taking any crap, and they know what's going on.
Oh, it's very encouraging, but at the same point, someone like me anyway, the discouraging part of it is it's so obvious that they're right, and to see all this backlash that they're getting is depressing as well.
But they're going forward anyways. They've been hardened by years of this, and they're not backing down. Even some of the weaker members of that team, like Pam Bondi, I don't know. I mean, a little bit shaky there, but they're still in it, and they're still doing it. And we can pray every day that they're fulfilling the mandate that they were elected to do. They actually do believe that the election has a consequence and that it's real. They're not just figureheads like past administrations who are just there as sort of doorkeepers. They did nothing. I mean, they're just, ceremonial. It's like what Michael Glennon talked about. They're the Madisonians as opposed to the Trumanites. These people are both the Madisonians and the Trumanites. They know where the power is and they know how to wield it. So look, I mean, maybe I'm being a little Pollyanna-ish about it, but I do believe that, I'd love to be on the inside of one of those cabinet meetings after the cameras leave and really hear what people are talking about, because they do know. Kash Patel knows damn well what's going on at the FBI. They should bury that building. I mean, even now, it's really, really rotten. The people in there, they're still sabotaging, but Trump knows that now. And they seem to have a handle on it. Laura Loomer, maybe she might make rude comments. Who cares? The point is that she's doing vetting people inside that government who are there to sabotage things, and she's
Oh
doing a
yeah.
good job.
Well, I mean, I've had personal experience at the corporate level of people trying to institute reform, and it just can't happen because it trickles down from the corrupt CEO all the way down, even sometimes the custodial staff,
Right.
and you just can't change it. It's incredible. It
Well, I mean, they certainly are giving it a shot. They're taking apart, this racist, critical race theory. I mean, I'm studying this in my sociology classes. It distorts race and creates conflict, and it's worse than Jim Crow. I mean, the way it portrays black people in a certain way
yeah.
that has nothing to do with reality.
Do you realize that all this crap came from academia?
Oh
Would the
yeah,
world be better off if you didn't have all these people?
they
That's a
are.
thought experiment
Yeah,
for you.
they are really they're insider operators. They want to. It's the same people that subverted the French Revolution, which was really an American style revolution, but it was taken over by these radical leftists who basically were doing the bidding of the authoritarians. They wanted to create, another a greater state, a more authoritarian entity, as opposed to what the people of France wanted, which is an American style revolution, which would have enfranchised the people. I mean, don't forget. I mean, Jefferson, Adams, and Ben Franklin spent the war years in Paris, and they had huge influence there, including on Louis XVI. And that's what they wanted as a revolution, not what they got, because it was subverted by secret societies. And that's what we're dealing with now. The same forces, and it's going to be very difficult to overcome them. These people have no morals, they've got no scruples, they are powerful, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to make sure that they preserve their advances, which is what we should be worrying about, and we should be learning how to expose. That's all we can do. Shine a light on the truth. That's all. I don't know what else we can do. I mean, I'm
No,
not
that's really all we can do, and hope that you red pill some people along the way.
exactly. So, Mike, what do you have coming up on your Substack?
Well, I got some pretty good comments on that last piece,
I'll bet. Great
and
piece.
I was going to maybe do a deeper dive.
From Bud Light to Cracker Barrel. Check it out. It's really a good piece.
Well, it was, there were a lot of questions that were raised in there that were not sort of properly answered in my mind. You started it, so I'll continue with this liberal white women thing. God knows where that came from.
What is that about? We'll have to do a deep dive on that sometime.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't get it. And you see it again and again and again.
Well, the ancient Greek
jobs.
the ancient
right now, the assistant general manager of the Cleveland Browns or Guardians, whatever the hell they call themselves,
yeah,
is some woman who was formerly a Canadian tax attorney that had one of these typical liberal white women resumes of having, jobs for, in her case, was more extreme, like a year at this or that organization, and then being hired as a complete DEI situation by this football team. I just don't know what motivates people to do this.
It's part of the DEI agenda. They have to pick categories as opposed to
Yeah.
people. That's why, like here in Boston, Michelle Wu, talk about like a leftist mayor. There's already been 4 indictments in her office just this year because she hires people based on, well, this person is a black gay woman. This person is this person's that. Has nothing to do with what, who they are. There's no vetting. There's no like.
I keep asking you this. How did she get elected? Where is this?
She's actually a very adept. I mean, I hate to say it, but she's a very adept politician. She knows how to. She's attractive. She's easy on the eyes. Frankly, she's very charismatic. She connects well with people. I mean, that's part of what it's about. That's why she got a $600,000 check from a businessman with connections to the CCP. I mean, because she's electable. People like her. She's interesting as a person. She's got a great story. Unfortunately, that's like this Mamdani guy
Yeah.
in New York.
But what is the electorate, though? I always thought
They are fooled. And
well,
plus, Boston has a
who
corrupt.
is a typical Bostonian that you would see running around? You tell me, and I believe you, that the Southeast stereotype doesn't really exist anymore, the way I remember it.
It's been knocked down a few pegs, but it's still there.
All right, so these are hardcore working class people. Why in the world would they vote for Michelle Wu?
And also, she's been selected by the Boston Globe, and the Boston Globe still runs the show in Boston. They've done it all my life. They have institutional power. They can make or break whoever they want, and they do it every time. The city, I think, has been corrupt in terms of election, of balloting, going back to the days of James Michael Curley, who was elected while he was in prison. It's
That's right.
Right. I mean, there's a novel that's actually a good read called The Las Hurrah by O'Connor, I think his name is, that talks about this old Irish political machine in Boston and how that functioned. It's still there. They're still running the city. They have ways of counting ballots. They have ways of curing precincts. That's how she got elected. And anybody who says otherwise, the Boston Globe will kill you. I mean, look, I learned a little bit about this.
You'll end up in the bottom of the Mystic River.
Well, at least proverbially, maybe not literally. Yeah. I mean, I can speak to this. It's a little too much to get into. Probably there are things I'll never talk about. During my own campaign for Congress in Boston, I learned a lot about how the city works on the inside. And I wasn't running in the city of Boston itself, but this is Massachusetts. I mean, it's the same deal. Anyways, so we'll talk next week.
All right. Well, this was our twofer.
Yes, I'm glad to have gotten this off my chest. This is really important to me. This was
a very spirited conversation, I think.
Indeed. And I hope that people wake up to this particular scandal, because this is the linchpin. This is the pivot.
I agree.
The thing. All right, Mike. So
you have a good one, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Take care.